It's robot talking time. I'm Lucas Ashpaw, and this is not Keegan. As mentioned last time, Keegan has since left, doing bigger and better things with his life. Um, before we get into things, first of all, just a precursor. It's definitely a not safe for work show, some swearing, other content, I suppose. And also, I just wanted to let everyone know things are going to be a little different today. Uh, I guess first off, not having Keegs. In future episodes, we're going to see if we can set up a software and kind of bring him in with a video feed, maybe up here. I don't know what it looks like on camera. Likewise, we also today are not going. If you are a visual follower, you're not going to be able to see any effects today. We've been traveling, myself and the cameraman, for about the past week. So we're just we're lucky to be squeezing this in. So figure we'll stick to the schedule, and I hope you enjoy the show this time. So let's get into it. First off, warning to anyone who listens to this, apparently BattleBots is once again being pushed off to a certain extent for the next 2 weeks. So with the Olympics, what they're going to be doing is they're going to be rerunning episodes 5 and 6. Kind of a bummer, but I understand that they don't want to risk losing the viewership due to the Olympics going. Don't like it, but I'll survive. I'll watch the old episodes, get all hyped again. It'll be a good time. So, getting into some of the recaps here. First off, we had Minotaur versus Warhead. This was quite the fight. This was really cool. I just want to start with a quote first, and I'll read this directly here from the Minotaur, one of the Minotaur teammates here. He says, quote, "Minotaur is so powerful that its biggest risk is it breaking itself. They have to take it apart every day to check it." That's crazy. That's cool to me. I mean, I think that's awesome that you have such a destructive bot that you have to monitor it every day to make sure that it didn't break itself in usage. And there's a fine line there. If you break yourself in usage in a fight, I don't think that's okay. I think that you have a responsibility to keep up on that. But in this context of being able to withstand the fight and just such an aggro, aggressive, almost demonic-like robot that you have to check its stats and vitals every day, that's great. I think you're really doing the right thing there. So, of course, as we all know, Warhead gets decapitated in 18 seconds. It was absolutely destroyed. You got that frisbee of death just flying around, and once again, it zooms in on Minotaur's intense face. That was crazy. Expected, I'd say expected, but crazy, and a little sad too, because Warhead and Team Razor, they've got some great sportsmanship before and after the loss. They really show and demonstrate what the sport's about, and they had a good time doing that fight. Next up, we have Poison Arrow versus Hypershock. Very aggressive fight, really fun to watch. I think a quote from the Hypershock pilot here really kind of sets the mood here. We have he says, "I kind of black out when I robot," and that is so true. Watching him, Hypershock dominated this fight. It was crazy to watch. I mean, I guess when you look at Poison Arrow, usually in prior fights, they'll come out true to their strategy, get one hard hit in, and try to win it from there, and maybe a little bit of rumbling after that. But beyond that, they're not quite suited for after that as well. This proved to be different, though, this time, at least for the first time, arguably, I should say, because for the longest time, Hypershock was just slamming them around everywhere. I mean, that must have been a really scary feeling if you're on the Poison Arrow team. But, at the same time, you have to give it to Poison Arrow for their great construction, though. To have a drum spinner that wide be able to take that much damage, I mean, that's quite the bruiser there, and not break. Because, you got Hypershock's spinner break, but Poison Arrow's spinner did not. which was crucial to winning this fight. So after getting slammed around, unfortunately, Hypershock ended up losing in the same way that we're very familiar with, of not being able to move. Although not as satisfying, I do like Poison Arrow a lot as well, so cool to see them move on. Again, just a shout out to that, to A, Hypershock's aggressive maneuvering there, but B, definitely a fan of how Poison Arrow sticks with it, takes those hits, and then brings it right back to them at the end. Great stuff. Next up, we have Bombshell versus Red Devil. So, kind of sad about this one. Obviously, if you've been following the show at all, our show, Blood God himself, as I would like to call it, has fallen. It's sad. I think Red Devil had a lot going for it. It had some really cool concepts that you don't quite see employed or deployed in other bots. The electrical system in triplicate, different mechanisms to keep from getting DQ'd from immobilization. Some really cool stuff there, and especially the strategy itself was really neat. But as I alluded to last week, they failed to get the grapple they needed. And I did think they were going to get that, so I hate to be standing here and saying that. But if they were going to win that fight, they needed to get that grapple on Bombshell, and it just didn't happen. I will give them credit, though. They took that first hit to the side from Bombshell when they first come at each other. Red Devil flips all the way over. They took that really well. I mean, I'm sure there was damage to, at that point, probably both bots. But this fight failed for Red Devil because their what would you call it? Their self-correcting mechanism. I don't want to call it that, though, because yes, I know that the internal part of the bot can spin around an entire 360 degrees, but is it really a self-correcting mechanism if you can't do it in under 2 or 3 seconds? I suppose by technicality it is, but in the instance of actually fighting, you got to get that 2 second mark there if you want to get up and be competitive. Otherwise, the other bot has time, 1 second to back up, another second to come back in. You're just vulnerable. And this is the first time we've really tried to see Red Devil deal with being flipped over. And it's so close to being able to function on both sides. If they had just set their jaws slightly differently, a little bit of different setup there, I feel like they really could make that work if they wanted to in the future, and I hope they do. But they really need to figure out a better way to get up in the meanwhile, at least. Having to for 5 seconds, just it's not practical. And of course, Bombshell definitely took advantage of this. They had their modular vertical spinner there, which went pretty well for them. It didn't really do any crazy amount of damage. I was surprised that Red Devil was able to sustain it to the way it did with such force. But either way, I hope to see that fixed in Red Devil, and I'd hope to see him come back next season. That is great bot, good season. Really enjoyed watching. Better luck next time. So now we have Bronco versus Razorback. Razorback has a drum spinner that they put on. I know they're modular. I wasn't sure exactly what parts they were coming in with, so that's pretty cool. I like that. Again, the drum spinner fad phase that the show is kind of emphasizing. I'm all about it. I think there's a lot of destruction there. No, there wasn't any suplexing like they had with Ghost Raptor, but still cool to see nonetheless. Even more accurately, Bronco had a great strategy. You always see bots kind of with the they deal differently with the force that's exerted from their attacks. So some of them will just try to absorb the shock. Some of them, like Chomp, will just jump up anyways. And I even yet until this fight to see a bot actually take that to their advantage. Watching Bronco just throw on a backwards plate armor and say, we'll flip you from any side. We have the energy to do it. That was cool. That was really cool. Props to them. Again, some smart people with some real passion there. Really neat to watch. And of course, it was a really interesting both satisfying and dissatisfying ending at the same time. Watching Razorback get flipped up on its side, at first I didn't believe it. I said, oh, well, they'll wobble around or do something a bit. And then you kind of zoom in, you see the wheels are spinning and they're stuck. I'm going to be curious to see if and how they address that moving forward, because it is a good bot. But I guess there's a cost-benefit analysis there. So they could try to round those side parts a little bit moving forward so that it doesn't happen to them. But at the same time, that kind of gives more leverage on vertical spinners. So maybe an alternative is just to put little almost nipples pointing out, these little metal nipples, so you can't quite get stable on your side. But again, that's a target for a vertical spinner. So I guess another way is to move in more movement than just spinning on one axis. But the more axes and the more movement you throw in there, the more vulnerable you are. So maybe they just won't address it. I don't know. Maybe this is just a freak accident, but it seems like it would be an easy fix to avoid moving forward. So I hope they do that. That's all I have to say on that. Just a cool fight. I thought that was great. I'm glad to see Bronco moving on. And I think, as we're all rooting for, it would be really nice to see a Bronco Tombstone fight at some point. We'll see. So now I'm actually going to get into some predictions. And again, we'll have to wait a bit to see how these turn out, which is too bad. But either way, I think we're going to see some pretty cool stuff. So first we have Tombstone versus Brutus. And I don't think there's a lot of guessing here. This is going to Tombstone for me. I fully believe in Tombstone. Ray Killings can only see red blood. It is just, I know Brutus has got some great mechanisms as well, but as I've mentioned earlier, you have this expert piloting and complete death machine Tombstone versus a rather novice piloting and questionable Brutus. As I said earlier, I think this is going to be a really interesting one. Next up, we have Beta versus Nightmare. And this is going to be another one of those rather explosive matches. So when I say that, I more mean just the energy being exerted here. The amount of force behind Nightmare's Nightmare Spinner, as I'll deem it, and Beta's hammer, that's insane. That's just like almost up with the Ice Wave Nightmare fight. And I'm going to say I'm throwing this one to Beta, in my opinion. That's who I think is going to win this. So we saw previously you have Ice Wave and Nightmare duking it out. Nightmare was one good hit away from losing that. And I think that's that one good hit that Beta can supply. On the other hand, Beta can take a beating, all right? They don't have a lot of loose, grippy parts for spinners to really clang onto, and that hammer is built to last. I would be interested to see if a sideways Beta getting hit by a vertical Nightmare exerts some force in the wrong direction and ends that fight there. That's a possibility. At the same time, though, I think Beta's pretty fast about self-correcting, and I think there's not a lot of ways that Nightmare can really flip Beta over itself beyond maybe slamming it into the wall or something as such. Furthermore, Nightmare, again, has those exposed bits. Most of their mechanisms are rather exposed in comparison to other bots. And, I like that full aggressive strategy. Just slap it on. We'll just run forward and take them out. That's great. And it's fun to watch. But it is an attack vector for Beta. We saw Ice Wave almost get a deathly hit on that, and Beta, although coming from a different axis, is coming with just as much force and just as much vigor. So it'll be cool to see that. Now, we finally get to see the Golden God himself, Bite Force, coming in against Chomp. Bite Force has been doing great so far this season. One thing we did see, Bite Force's primary weapon, the vertical spinner, had some issues before. So I hope that they've fixed those now. I'm not sure how many times they got in between those fights when this was actually being filmed. I hope it was enough to fix that, because that is now what they're throwing their entire backing behind. Although I believe in Bite Force, I still think this is going to be an interesting fight. Going over to Chomp. Chomp has been really impressive so far. They have exceeded every single one of my expectations. And maybe I should elaborate. The new Chomp. So previously they had 2 operators. Now they have a pilot, an operator, and a weapon telemetry operator there as well. But either way, I think that Chomp itself, previously when they were fighting Captain Shredderator, they did come out on top, and that was great. But they were a little shaky around coordinating. And I think that is going to be interesting. Maybe now, so in this next match, they've kind of worked that out. And you know, that it's hard to get on top of, but we've seen some great examples. I mean, one example is you see Poison Arrow when they're firing up their spinner. You've got the teammate standing over the pilot's shoulder, and he's going 1, 2, 3, counting up, waiting for that exact time for when that spinner is at optimal capacity there. So it's doable, not easy, but doable. So we'll see how that's delivered. But there are some similarities we can draw from the Captain Shredder Chomp fight here. Not so much the Bite Force Ringmaster fight, though, the Ringmaster. Bite Force does have a large flat top, okay? And that is an optimal target for Chomp. Now, the difference here, though, is it is not nearly as weak as Captain Shredderator's top, in my understanding, anyways. Another difference being Bite Force has the ability to play off of Chomp's instability more so. So depending on how much of a grappling mechanism and strategy they want to go for here, Chomp is a tall bot. That's going to be wobbly, and especially with a vertical spinner and some wedges, I think it's just going to be a lot of self-righting and a lot of oh shit moments, facilitated by the one and only Bite Force, of course. But this will be a fun fight to watch. I hope it goes well. Next up, we have Yeti versus Mega Tento. I'm just bitter about this still. Talking about Mega Tento is hard for me. I think Yeti's got this one. I'm going to throw it to Yeti. But I think Yeti is less qualified to fight Mega Tento than Stinger was, in my opinion. Yes, they have that 4,000 RPM drum spinner there. When I guess I don't know quite how hardy the internal portion of Mega Tento is, but I mean, I think the most damage I really see that spinner doing without a good hit is just kind of ripping up that plastic grappling mechanism. And yeah, you can hurt it, you can shatter it, but it's still going to have scraps, and it's going to be doing what it was designed to do. I guess we'll see. It's been rather obvious that grapple bots have not been as favorable as ridiculously high delivering damage primary weapons. So Yeti might have a good front there. But I don't know. I think another thing that factors into this is I don't even think Mega Tento should be in this position. I think it's Stinger. And I think it was a very unlucky call for Stinger that they didn't move forward. I would be surprised, even if it was close, that would happen again. Oh, now that I'm really saying it, I think we're going to see a good hit from Yeti on Mega Tento. However, I guess we'll see how that turns out. If that ends up breaking the grappling mechanism, if that breaks the drummer, if that actually takes out the movement, and then they're good to go. But at the same time, though, if you are trapped within Mega Tento and Mega Tento dies out, you know, you've got the DK, grab someone, jump off the edge, Super Smash Bros. Strategy. How does that play out, right? And I think that'll come up to Yeti's prongs to try to grab its way out there. Not grab, maneuver its way out there. We'll see. It's too bad we have to wait so long to see. I'm rooting for Yeti. I was looking it up. Yeti's got this really cool mechanism that they use to analyze the bot after fights. So what you usually see is rather, you could say proactive, but average approach at replacing worn parts and trying to get your bot ready for the next fight. Yeti takes it a little bit further here, okay? After every fight, they, with an infrared camera, look at the bot and they see where the heat and the tension is. And before a piece can even break, they're able to figure out where that stress is and how to best move forward. I think that's awesome. That's great planning. That's ingenuity. That's what BattleBots is all about. That's great, and I cannot wait to see this fight. Too bad I don't have Keegs here to taunt. This week up with my fantasy bracket, we, that being myself and the other high competitor who is still in first place tied with me, we're at 29 wins to 15 losses. And no one else seems very close within 3 or 4 fights, that is, which is awesome. This upcoming week should split us apart a little bit, I think, but possibly not. Anyways, that's all I've got for this week. Next week, hopefully, you'll see Keegs kind of floating around me or something, or maybe even a new co-host, temporarily at least. We'll see how that goes. There'll be a lot to talk about, I'm sure, and thanks for tuning in. That's robot talking time. Until next time.